All right. Have to practice those methods of taming anger. When you feel anger, turn toward reason. That's the Christian way. Christianity is specifically a religion of reason. Remember, you weren't supposed to just follow rules. You're supposed to think about them, or there wouldn't have been a Mary Magdalene. So, instead of going into some rage about, well, socialists, you have a choice between somebody as threatening as Joe Rogan, Crowder, or Shapiro, or you have, choose people who are definitely probably sane, because you'll always have the option when the lights go out to deal with somebody like me, who my solutions will work, but they won't be ethical, moral, or sane. The deputy's ideological roots. Chapter 23 of Disinformation. It's best to say, devil, why do you send minions to menace me so? And the devil replies, because you so enjoy their company. So I had to turn to reason, to tame this horrible feeling of anger I was having as I research the takeover of our society by idiots who want central planning because they want everybody to obey orders. No, I prefer fun. I'm a boy. I don't like when people just tell me. The deputy is just another Potemkin village. Its producer, Erwin Piscator, matured politically and professionally in the service of the Soviet Union, where all forms of arts, including theater, were supposed to dish up the Kremlin's disinformation needs. Soviet composer Dmitry Shostakovich explained, by the late 1920s, the honeymoon with the Soviet government was over for genuine artists. In order to be in favor, to receive commissions, and live peacefully, one had to get into state harness and plug away. It's almost like they would have to go to one of very few information and entertainment cartels and obey the rules so they weren't demonetized or deplatformed. Just thinking out loud. To be branded as one who did not conform to the Soviet line could be lethal. For many years, the most gifted and sensitive of the Soviet poets, novelists, and dramatists either were silent or wrote for the drawer, secretly, or only for the intimacy of family and trusted friends. In April 1932, the Soviet government and the Communist Party issued an epic decree for Soviet artists on the reorganization of art and literary organizations. This is in capitals at the beginning of everything. This decree placed artistic control into the hands of two new groups, the Union of Soviet Writers and the Union of Soviet Composers. Through these unions, Stalin secured an unprecedented degree of control over the arts and the artists. Stalin strengthened and perfected the system of creative unions. Within the framework of this system, the right to work and therefore to live as an artist came only to those officially registered and approved. The creative unions of writer, composers, and artists et al. Were formed, beginning in 1923, as bureaucratic organizations with strictly defined ranks and with equally strong accountability and constant cross-checking. Every organization had a branch of security services, or secret police, as well as innumerable unofficial informers, trusted flaggers. Any attempt to circumvent one's union ended badly. Bronx blogger would come and visit you, I guess. Various forms of pressure and repression were always ready. Moreover, obedience was rewarded. Behind this well-oiled and smoothly running mechanism stood the figure of Stalin, an inevitable presence that often gave events a grotesque, tragicomic coloration. That same year, on October 26, Stalin also coined the term socialist realism. As described by a Soviet author, socialist realism implies an art imbued with communist ideology, that is to say, its very core is a deliberate, purposeful struggle for the victory of communism and the valuation of life in the light of communist ideals. An American scholar explained socialist realism became an officially imposed aesthetic standard which every art in the USSR, without a single exception, was forced to follow. In order for a literary work to pass the test of socialist realism, it had to coincide with the Kremlin's interests and to portray Soviet life in an optimistic manner, showing positive heroes, miners, overfilling their production quotas, military heroes, or stalwart Soviet women heroically and literally laying the brick and mortar of a new society. Inappropriate poetry could lead to the poet's arrest. Stalin even had several painters shot. Ballet was required to embody the ideals of heroism, duty, honor, comradeship, and other virtues of the new Soviet citizen. The Soviets even took control over the development of circus performers. In early 1936, the Central Executive Committee and the Council of People's Commissars established an all-union committee for the affairs of the arts in the Council of People's Commissars, all capitals. All theatrical productions, the cinema industry, and all institutions fostering music, painting, sculpture, or any other form of art came under the authority of this group. At each venue, the theatrical director and the artistic director had to prepare a yearly repertoire plan of all productions and submit it to the committee for approval. The committee also evaluated each new production after dress rehearsal. Stalin and Andrei Zhdanov, the party ideologue for cultural matters, determined the official attitude toward various plays, ballets, literature, and other art forms. Zhdanov announced, the Central Committee of Bolsheviks demands beauty and refinement from music. Zhdanov argued that the Soviet army is victorious. We are advancing on Europe, and Soviet literature must be in aid in this. It must attack bourgeois culture, which is in a state of confusion and decay. Zhdanov wanted to strike a blow at harmful influences such as the spirit of negative criticism, downvotes, and ratioing, despair and non-belief. Grigory Yevseyevich Zinoviev, chairman of the Petrograd City Soviet, ordered all the opera houses in the city, today St. Petersburg, to be closed. He explained that the proletariat did not need opera houses. They are a heavy burden for the proletariat. We Bolsheviks can't carry the heavy burden anymore. Stalin also shut down at least one other opera house. One typical episode of the regime's approach to those who dared to defy it involved a popular director, actor, composer named Vsevolod Emilievich Meyerhold. In 1938, his theater was shut down on Stalin's personal command, and an anti-Meyerhold campaign was smeared all over the pages of the press. Later, Meyerhold disappeared without a trace in the years of the Great Terror. Like everything else, radio was also heavily censored in the Soviet Union. Everyone knows that you can't appear on radio if your text hasn't been passed by the censor. Not one, but almost 10 censors, each of whom signs. If the papers aren't signed, no one will let you near a microphone. Who knows what you might say to the whole country? Under this regime, many Soviet theatrical productions intentionally promoted anti-clericalism. For instance, when originally produced, the ballet Paganini depicted a tormented artist who sold himself to the devil in exchange for perfection in the ability to play the violin. When produced later, the choreographer purposefully shifted emphasis to make the true forces of evil in the plot to be the Catholic Church, represented by black clad hooded figures who pierce Paganini with their violin bows, while a cardinal stands in the background wielding a huge cross, as author Mary Grace Swift explained. Closely linked with this element, an anti-religious strain appears, which tries to make religion look either silly or sinister, whether dealing with Muslims or Christians. Figures representing religion, knights, monks, or characters enforcing Muslim customs are depicted as instruments of oppression against a heroine who stands for all the bright patriotic virtues of her particular national group. If the art in question did not serve the party's interest, it was banned. Beginning in 1946, one party resolution after another was proclaimed containing attacks on books, plays. Moreover, reproduction of forbidden books was made virtually impossible because all the printing presses were taken over by the state. Tikhon Karenikov was appointed by Stalin to administer Soviet music. We shall administer you music. In 1948 was the first Composers' Congress. He proclaimed, "Armed with clear party directives, we will put a final end to any manifestations of anti-people, formalism, and decadence, no matter what defensive coloration they may take on." The Congress unanimously condemned several leading composers for being formalists. This, of course, led to many compositions praising Stalin and the Soviet Union. As one composer said, they sang about Stalin the Eagle. I think there must have been some 20,000 songs, maybe more. It would be interesting to work out how much money our leader paid out for songs about our leader. Stalin, who had a superlative appreciation of the propaganda potential of art, paid special attention to film. He saw the Soviet movies had a powerful emotional effect. Stalin wanted our film industry to put out only masterpieces. He was convinced that under his brilliant leadership and personal guidance, it would do so. He did not hesitate to use his authority. If he ordered a film made, they made it. If he ordered them to stop shooting, they stopped shooting. That happened many times. If Stalin ordered a finished film destroyed, they destroyed it. That happened more than once too. The Soviets were also happy to use American art forms to advance their cause in the United States. By the 1940s, American communists had fully embraced and significantly co-opted folk music. The American Communist Party was essentially an agency of the Soviet government. Folk singers had become a ceremonial part of Communist Party meetings. The effect that they wanted with music was national in form and revolutionary in content. Folk singers in the Soviet Union did not fare as well. Now it gets fun. Native art was considered counter-revolutionary because, like most ancient art, it was religious in nature. As such, it was rooted out in the 1920s and 1930s. In some cases, this was done with great ruthlessness. Since time immemorial, folk singers have wandered along the roads of the Ukraine. They're called lirniki and banduristi there. They were almost always blind and defenseless people, but no one ever touched or hurt them. Hurting a blind man, what could be lower? And then, in the mid-30s, the first all-Ukrainian Congress of Lirniki and Banduristi was announced, and all the folk singers had to gather and discuss what to do in the future. Life is better, life is merrier, Stalin had said. The blind men believed it. They came to the Congress from all over Ukraine, from tiny forgotten villages. There were several hundred of them at the Congress. They say it was a living museum, the country's living history, all its songs, all its music and poetry. And they were almost all shot. Almost all those pathetic blind men killed. The folk singers were killed because collectivization was underway. The Soviets had wiped out the kulaks as a class, and these singers were singing songs of dubious content. The songs weren't approved by the censors. They really could not even be submitted for approval. They were not written down. You can't hand a blind man a corrected and approved text, and you can't write him an order either. You have to tell everything to a blind man. That takes too long. And you can't file away a piece of paper, and there's not time anyway. Collectivization, mechanization. It was easier to shoot them. Eventually, the Soviet leaders wanted to show the world that they had native culture. So they invented a new folk singer, poet. Zhambul Jabayev's poetry was supposedly written in Kazakh and then translated into Russian. Children studied his work in school. The only thing was Jabayev did not write songs, and the translators did not read Kazakh. The so-called translations of the non-existent poems were written by Russian poets, and they didn't even ask our great folk singer for permission. Real oral tradition was replaced by stories and songs that served the party's needs, much as false histories of Catholic leaders would replace the truth about them. In the 1950s, after Stalin's death, Soviet artists were often sent overseas to spread Communist Party's message. In 1954, several well-known Russian performers put on a series of concerts in England to inaugurate British-Soviet Friendship Month. Their performances were reminiscent of the old pre-revolutionary meetings, for the spectators were urged by certain newspapers to begin certain societies, and the dancers performed against a background of British and Soviet flags, sharing the stage with various officials and members of the diplomatic corps, including the Soviet ambassador. To Marx, religion was an opiate of the people, and the USSR theatrical world has stressed this concept. Certain ballet productions have purposely made religion appear both stupid and vile. Of course, the choice of productions was political, not artistic. It is somewhat amazing that artists of the nation, which produced Swan Lake or Firebird, would voluntarily produce Native Fields or Tatiana without official urging. The example has been cited where the Ministry of Culture ordered in 1958 that each opera and ballet theater should produce one contemporary ballet a year. If a theater should have other plans, the party chief is on hand in the theater to see that such directives are enforced. So you got to administer art, and if it's not administered correctly, you enforce. Enforce the artist. Enforce the artism. You get that art in them. Get it deep in there. Stick it in them. Motherfuckers, you're gonna like this shit. And don't worry, this is nothing like She Rambe and Pussy Busters. This is nothing like was it the Mary Sue takeover of all things in comic books, movies, and video games that nobody wants to purchase. It's not that there's a bunch of commie pieces of shit trying to change the culture. Oh no. See, the people don't understand. They need this shit enforced. They need somebody there to tell them what's good. This is what really is art. Or like, what was it? How did Hollywood, when they were mad at Orange Man Blumph, what was it that they said? We are the culture. That's what Rosie O'Donnell said, if I remember correctly. We are the culture. These Hollywood fucking these specialists at buggery and blowing fucking cocaine up their nose. Yeah, the fucking assholes, weird assholes who have glass backs, silk palms, and a whole lot of not really anything fucking special other than playing themselves on camera. I don't watch movies much. They mean nothing to me. I don't understand why people think there's something to cinema. And I know there's going to be a lot of you who are going to be like, whoa, but no, really, easily. I think you really get it. I think it's entirely Pareto's distribution. 20% of TV, 20% of books, 20% of movies. Those are the ones that are moving the art form. All the rest of it is just there to keep the fucking company open, to keep all the stupid people paying out, so that something genius can be made. So that there's that 2 out of 10 works can be real genius. No, that's why when I realized my writing was no good, I stopped. It's a Martin Van Krebel shouldn't have to compete against some idiot like me writing bullshit. There's no such thing as an independent journal in the Soviet Union. As the Anti-Defamation League explained in 1961, everything published in the USSR for popular consumption is rigidly controlled by the state, and every opinion expressed in a newspaper is equivalent to an official opinion. One Soviet author complained, Tsar's censorship practices pale in comparison with the policy of the Soviet government. Erwin Piscator and his framing of Pius XII in The Deputy were products of this society. From chapter 23 in Disinformation by Ion Mihai Pachepa, The Deputy's Ideological Roots, discussing the famous anti-Catholic play, The Deputy, by, I believe it's Erwin Piscator and Rolf Hochhuth. All right, later on.